This is Reid's top 5 greatest Tigers of all time.
Yeah, I'll start at 5, and then I'll work my way to 1. Um, 5, I obviously am putting in one of the guys we're pretty familiar with, probably one of the best pitchers in Tigers and regular MLB history. So Justin Verlander, I put at 5. I know some people might think that's a little dicey because he did leave and had a lot more success after he left. When he won the World Series with the Astros, went on and won another Cy Young with the Astros. So his whole career and his awards weren't with the Tigers. That's kind of why I put him down a little bit on the list. But he still did amazing things. 2011 was that Cy Young AL MVP year, 24-5 with a 2.40 ERA. So that's like obviously really good for a pitcher. Is it? A lot of these guys are the old ones that we know, the old names that we know. So Al Kaline, I put at 4. He's one of the most well-known Tigers we know. Hall of Famer, 18-time All-Star, 10-time Gold Glove winner, won the World Series with the Tigers. We know they haven't won many of those. And he'd spent all 22 years of his career as the Tigers, part of the 3,000 hit club, only one of 32 players. So I think that's a pretty cool accomplishment to have for a Tiger. 3, name that people may not recognize if you're not really deep into baseball, again, is Hank Greenberg. He wasn't an amazing baseball player by any stretch of the means stat-wise, but he did have 2 MVPs. He was a 5-time All-Star, won 2 World Series with the Tigers. And then obviously, he was in that era of like the DiMaggios and the guys that went and served in World War II when they had to, back in. So I just have to tip that to those kind of baseball players left and served the country and came back. 2, I put on a guy that we're familiar with, obviously. Most recent in the news was Miguel Cabrera. I mean, what can I say about Miguel Cabrera, but nothing but good things. Obviously, he's slowed down the last couple of years, but the team also has slowed down the last couple of years. So, you can't really expect him to be the greatest player on your franchise almost and continue to get, slubs and nobodies on your team. So as we know, 2-time MVP, he has a triple crown. He's the first person to get the triple crown since 1967. So that's a huge accomplishment in its own. I mean, go that long forward and then he finally gets it. And not to mention, he almost won it back to back, loss to Chris Davis, who was juicing at the time and beat him in RBIs, I believe. He's part of the 3,000 hit club. What else do you have to say about Miggy? We've been hearing it all week. And then last but not least, the Georgia Peach Tiger, as we know, probably the greatest Tiger of all time. He has a triple crown as well. He has second all time in hits behind the better himself, Pete Rose, who should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. And Hank is just one. He had 4,189 hits. It's huge. I don't know anybody that's going to really beat that nowadays, in my opinion. And then he's first in batting average all time. So obviously, Ty Cobb, you have to put him in there. We see his statue all over Comerica Park, numbers on the wall. Justin Verlander, Kaline, Greenberg, Cabrera, Ty Cobb at 1.
Okay, that's a respectable list. I like it. I'm glad you put Verlander in there. I was wondering if you were going to do that or not. Personally, because I put him in my top 5. So I'm glad you had Verlander in there.
So I was battling Verlander at anywhere from 3 to 5, just because he's the only pitcher on the list. He's probably the one of the, maybe like next to Trammell or one of the guys that was pitching back in the days in the 80s and 90s. Maybe put them up there if you want, but I just think Verlander's all around better pitcher for the Tigers than those guys were. So I had him anywhere from 3 to 5. I just decided to put Al Kaline. He's obviously a big name, and Greenberg just because those guys played all their whole careers with them. So, and same with Miggy. He basically played his whole career other than the World Series he won in Miami. But that was 4 years there, something like that, where they traded for him.
Yeah. So I mean, hey, honorable mention to guys like Cecil Fielder, Pudge. Those guys, great Tigers as well. But
I mean, can't forget about the only guy I feel like probably should have got on the list is Jack Morris.
I was thinking about him.
I figured, that's the only other one I would say. We can argue. You said Alan Trammell, so I like the list. I think we'll recognize more of the guys that were kind of in our era, because a lot of those guys were in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. And usually when I think about this franchise, I think about historically really good at pitching. Normally we haven't produced some of the best, infield players since the '90s, but good list though overall.